Alright, this is for the people that follow my work. You guys are my friends. You're my family. I care about you. You're important to me. I value you. So I am going to legitimately and officially introduce myself to you. And I'm seeking validation, okay? Because I've been pretty much a ghost till recently. I can't even say pretty much, literally. I'm a ghost. I don't really exist. And I have a really messed up, conspicuous identity. And if you follow my work, you know how I am about words and their antonyms. The antonyms of our words are the foundation of a balanced education. All right? They speak to the balance of our existence. We need to know the opposite, the exact opposite of anything, if we're going to know anything about it in this realm. That's the only way to learn something, is to know its opposite first. Everything in our existence has its equal and opposite pressing against it. Everything is a force, especially our words. Words are metaphysical. Metaphysical, meaning more than physical. That means they have mass. They take up space, okay? And when we use a word to make a lie, it takes up space, or it extrapolates space. Either way, we're going to run out of space when we use them all up, all right? Metaphysically. And metaphysical force presses against physical objects, okay? Once we've done all the pressing we can possibly do, something's going to happen, all right? And that is where we get to the manifestation of the ultimate truth and reality. Now, again, I was talking about antonyms. Our names all have their own antonyms. Nominative determinism is a muffin rubber, all right? Nominative determinism means if my name was Johnny Walker Schumacher, I'm probably going to end up making and selling shoes, okay? Now, my middle name is Michael, all right? And my whole name, if you look up my name right now, you will find the identity of a criminal, a full-blown, full-fledged criminal. When I was living in the void, when I didn't have my memory and my identity, I did it all. My criminal history is I got receipts. I did everything except molest kids and rape women. All of it. I broke the law every day. I got up in the morning and pissed criminalism, shit misdemeanors, and fart felonies. All right? And I'm not making any embellishments in this story. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be skipping over some of the more intense stuff, just so it doesn't come off as a pity party. Okay? Now, again, I have a really conspicuous and cursed name, like I said before. It's very unfortunate. It's a Hebrew name, and it comes with some of the most profound curses in creation. The curse of knowing. You know, I have to know. You guys, if you know, again, you follow my work, so you know how it is. You know how I am. You know. So, I'm going to give you some insight. I don't want to call it philosophy, because I don't like uncertainty. And philosophy is debatable. Nothing I'm going to say is debatable. There is no question anymore. We are beyond all lies. The absolute truth is inevitable. And I can't lie to you. I'm speaking directly from my feelings. I don't know how else to speak. I speak the Omega language. You hear it in my voice. It is the sound of the truth. That's just how I talk. So, my full name is Nathaniel Michael Jaffe Norris. Now, if you Google my name right now, Google my name and Duluth, Minnesota, you'll find a story about an accused stalker and kidnapper. Okay? Now, I want you to consider the antonyms of that. Okay? Because, you know, on my TikTok, I'm Michael7078. Michael's my middle name. Our middle names sit at the center of who we are. It's just like that saying, yeah, you know, that's my freaking middle name. Okay? It's my middle name. Alright? And the antonyms of my middle name happen to be pretty profound. And again, I've got receipts. Nothing I'm going to tell you is embellished. Everything I'm going to tell you is true. Alright? So, first of all, when it comes to true righteousness is only manifested in the shadow of profound wrongdoing. All right? You can't have righteousness without its counterpart. What we see in our world today, the corruption everywhere, what's wrong with all the politics and everything, there's one problem. That's intelligence, wisdom, and knowledge. The people running this world have plenty of it. All of it. Until now. Okay? Now, wisdom, intelligence, and knowledge without moral fortitude is just weaponized stupidity. That's all it is. That's why you look around and you see dangerous nonsense everywhere, because wisdom and knowledge and intelligence without moral fortitude is weaponized stupidity. And I say that to say this. There is no greater teacher in creation than suffering herself. Okay? That's where I got my education. Well, that's the foundation of my education. Alright? But that's our teacher. That's where we learn. Because in this realm, there is one power greater than love. Nobody realizes it. But it is the light. Alright? It is the power of overcoming itself. Because if you fall in love, you get married, you get divorced, you have a relationship, you get your heart broke, you now have to overcome love. Moreover, truth hurts. The more truth is in you, the more you're going to be hurt. It's inevitable. You fall in love with somebody, you get married, you spend your life together, you're going to get hurt. Somebody has to go at the end. One of you has to go at the end. You have to go on to the next place. And that's going to hurt. The more truth that was in you, the more you had that feeling for that person, the more you're going to suffer. Truth is like the fire that validates itself to you. It burns the hell out of you to validate that it's true and that it's real. But you need it to keep warm and to see. Okay? Its counterpart has to be there. Its opposite has to be there. And that's why I'm introducing myself to you as a criminal. I am a felon before I'm anything else. Anybody who's ever lived under that demonization of that word knows it affects absolutely categorically every single last corner of your life, every single minute of every day, all the time, no matter what. So that's who I am first. Now, like I said, if you Google my name, you look my name up, you'll find a long, elaborate, detailed, messed up, twisted story about me being a stalker and a kidnapper. Okay? That's what you'll look at. That's what you'll find. You'll find me being demonized. Completely demonized. Now, when I was a kid, and my dad was giving my education, he said we had to learn everything vicariously. And when we watched the news, he said, if we're going to watch the news, anytime you watch the news, son, there's only one way to watch the news. Alright? There's only one way to deal with the media. And he would quiz me. We would watch the news, and he would say, alright, son, you saw that program. We watched it for the last half hour. Now, I want you to tell me in detail exactly everything that they didn't say. Because that's how you watch the news. You only listen to exactly what they don't say in detail. That's how the news works. So when you read that story about me being a stalker and a kidnapper, pay close attention to exactly everything that they don't say. Okay? Because when I got my education as a child, we lived in fear. We were afraid we were going to die every single day. And again, I'm not making any embellishments in this story. I'm just validating myself here, okay? But we lived in fear. We were being terrorized in what was a high-profile hate crime. It was in the newspaper over the course of like a year, where a prison guard was left a bunch of messages on our answering machine about killing and mutilating and hanging N-words. You know, us, our family. And I was 12 years old. I was just old enough to understand and to feel and to be terrified. You know? And again, we spent a little more than a year eating every meal like it was our last, and learning every lesson like it was the last thing we were going to learn. And I asked this question before in another video, and it's important. What would you teach your kids? What would you teach them if you knew it was the last thing they were ever going to learn? And what would you want to learn if it was the last lesson that you would ever be taught? Because that's really important. And what Dad did was the foundation of my education, everything we learned and everything we were taught was based on moral fortitude, truth. The morality of the mind that thinks and the fortitude of our feelings that feel. Now I can get more into detail about the terrorism that we faced and the prison guard. There's newspaper articles. If you go add me on Facebook as Michael Norris, you can go through my uploaded photos, browse my uploaded photos until you see newspaper articles about a prison guard, because it tells a story. It talks about, it explains what the system does and how the news works when everything that they don't say, because they characterized my dad as nothing except a black man. That's the only word they used to characterize my dad. They didn't say that he was a single father at the video store with his 3 youngest kids. They didn't say that. They didn't even quote the stuff that was on the answer machine. They didn't even mention what this cop actually said, how he talked about mutilating and killing our family. They didn't. Just read it. They did what they do. They did what they do. And I had to be sent to counselors. Okay? And my dad was going to sue. They sent me to counselors in school. Every day I had to go see these counselors who would blame me. I was getting in trouble, getting in fights and stuff, getting beat up and acting out. My parents had just got divorced, barely a year before. And, I had the foundation, the ground ripped out from underneath me with that. So, I was acting out, but not because of the divorce, but because I was living in an all-white place. And I had what they called a Jufro, and the kids in school would beat me up because my hair drew attention. The little girls wanted to touch it, and the little boys used it to hold my head down so they could punch me in the face. And they would punch me in the face and call me Jufro N-word kid. And my dad couldn't homeschool me. There was no homeschool in this place. I grew up in Bismarck, North Dakota. So there was no option but to send me to this school. So Dad did something profound, all right? He at this time in my life, he always called me by my middle name. He called me Michael, and he said it like a term of endearment. When he said my name, it just the same as you hear the truth in my voice, this man conveyed the most profound love. Every time he said my name, he said it in a way that told me that no matter what he was doing, whatever he was working on, there was nothing more important than the moment that he was going to spend with me and talking to me. I was his favorite son, and he wasn't shy about saying it. He had over 14 offspring. He was married twice. He came from Detroit. He was born in 1945. He came from a different time, a different era. Things were different then. He was a different kind of man. I can't even call him special because it would be a profound understatement. He was different. All the way different. I think of every movie I've ever seen and all the action characters and mysterious heroes and everything, and I can't think of a single person to compare my dad to. He was an astrologist, a singer, a musician, an artist, among other things. And he also happened to be a trained martial artist in Kempo Karate, which is a traditional martial art. It's a practice of striking. And one of the things that he did to prepare me for school was beat my ever-loving monkey ass. I was a hard-headed kid. I didn't listen. I was very difficult to raise. I had a smile on my face all the time that you just couldn't wipe off my face. I couldn't stop smiling as a kid because I was a happy kid. And he had to wipe that smile off my face. He had to kill the child. He had to. When we got those messages on the answer machine, I'll never forget the look in his eye. He looked at me and he said, "Son, you don't get to be a kid anymore. You can't be a kid. You can't do the stuff that the other kids get to do. It's time for you to be a man. You have to be a grown man. And I'm going to raise you as my equal." Now, I was 12 years old. And Dad, as part of my education, it was a very strict, very disciplined education. Punishment for my academic shortcomings was vicious and usually unexpected and sharp. He struck me hard with the skill of a martial artist, a trained martial artist, and a 6'3", 220-pound man from Detroit who knew how to hit. And I'm all of 4 foot something, whatever, and 80 pounds, and he hit me hard and did it without breaking bones, without drawing blood. He hit hard, and he did it not because he was abusive. He did it to desensitize me to violence. He said, "Son, there's going to come a time in your life when you will be attacked violently for no other reason other than because of who you are and how you look. Okay? And I can't possibly prepare you in any way for imminent extreme physical violence by sheltering you from it. And that is the reason for the discipline in your education, son. So that it has practical application in your life. Okay? And never at any point, even when I was on the ground gasping for air after getting popped in the solar plexus for no other reason than walking around the corner to go to the kitchen to get some water and having my abs unflexed and not keeping my stomach tight like I was supposed to, like I was trained to and taught to, so that I'd be ready for a blow at any time. Gasping on the floor, gasping for air, I could still hear the calm, resonant tone of my dad's voice explaining to me the difference between being punched in the stomach and the solar plexus and how you can't really block a move like that. And it was comforting. And he conveyed the most profound love to me. And I trusted him. If at any point I ever said, Dad, don't do that, or Dad, stop, I never had to, but there was no question. There was no question. Some of us won't understand that. Some of us will not understand the gratuitous physical violence and the necessity for it. Some people are going to hear that and say, your dad was abusive. Period. That's abuse. You can't tell me nothing. Okay. That's how you feel. I know better. I'm not nearly the man that he was. Could you imagine the supernatural force that it takes to strike your most beloved, precious thing in the world hard? To strike him to the floor, to throttle that kid to the floor. Could you imagine? That is supernatural. Because our natural inclination to our kids is to coddle them and shelter them if we know that there's imminent violence. If that's what we do, that's natural. What he did was supernatural. Okay? But he took it a step further. He took it a lot further. Because when I went to school, the counselors would blame me for the fights I would get in, for getting beat up. They said, look, if you just shaved your afro off and didn't draw so much attention to yourself with it, you know, you wouldn't get beat up so much. And they were right. Because, like I said, the kids would use my hair to hold my head down to hit me in the face. So when I started shaving my head off, it was a lot harder to beat me up. I was squirrely. Now, I loved my hair. I was going to be Samson, like Samson and Delilah. I loved my hair. But I had to shave it off. And my dad, raising me to be a man, helped me do it. He treated me as his equal. He raised me as his equal. He did magic. He was capable of real magic. Within less than a year, he transmuted me from a 12-year-old child into the fully developed metaphysical form of a fully developed man. Within less than a year. Because our education was life and death. Every lesson was life and death. He said it all the time. All the time. He said, son, they could come take me at any time. I need you to pay attention. You need to listen to what I have to say. So being in a state of fear for your life with a threat of immediate physical violence puts you in the most profound state of attentiveness. There is no greater state of attentiveness. So I learned everything that this man had to teach me. Everything that he ever knew. He desperately, with every fiber of his being, taught me everything he possibly could about this world. And again, he came from a different time. He was born in 45. Segregation didn't end until he was in his early 20s. Okay? And he had a kind of a fetish for esoterics. You know, and esoterics to me is just another word for truth. And he also spent time in the void. There was his life is kind of a mystery to me, but there was a time where he had amnesia and came out of it. But I remember, you know, just for example, I remember waking up and him reading to me out of the Quran or out of the Bible or out of a metaphysics book or Sun Tzu's Art of War. You know, he was always reading literature. He would find the most useful and the most profound literature, and he would read and read and read for hours and hours and hours. And I would wake up and I would say, Dad, why are you still reading? Because tears would be streaming down his face because his eyes were so dried out because he was reading so much. And I would say, Dad, why did you keep reading to me? I fell asleep. And he said, son, your subconscious mind absorbed everything that I just read to you. And he would proceed to ask me questions. And I would answer him. our state of attentiveness was that extreme. I could wake up on a dime. People were terrorizing us for more than a year. They would drive by our house in the middle of the night and let shots off and wake up the dogs, throw stuff at our house. We constantly got phone calls. We lived out in the country on the edge of town, about 5 miles out of town, outside of Bismarck, North Dakota. Again, which is an all-white place in 1998. All white. We were the closest thing to any minority in a 100-mile radius, other than maybe a smattering of native people that I didn't go to school with even. So it was a really rough year and a half or so. This is when I was 12. And this education of mine was wiped away from me. Again, Dad made a profound sacrifice. They would send me to these counselors, and these counselors would blame me for my acting out. They would blame me for me getting beat up. They said, little black kids make trouble. That's just what they do. They're trouble. And what's worse is they've got this big black complaining N-word, my dad, complaining about stuff all the time. So, you know, these black people just complain, is all they do, and get in trouble. So I blame myself. I took full responsibility. They said, you need to stop talking about what happened. You need to stop talking about that prison guard. You need to shut up about it and forget that it happened. Forget it, stop talking about it, and maybe you won't get beat up so much. The kids don't want to hear about it. Nobody wants to hear about it. Just stop talking about it and you won't get beat up. Now, the difference between aggressive brainwashing and regular brainwashing is aggressive brainwashing is reinforced with physical violence. So I forgot about it. And I shut up about it. And I didn't remember it for about 22 years. From 13 to 33. Just a few years ago when I recorded those YouTube videos. Now again, absolutely every single word that I'm telling you can be validated somehow. You can go on my Facebook and see the newspaper articles, get an idea of what kind of people they were, what kind of place I grew up in, where I came from, who my teachers were, and where I got my education. The most gifted teacher in all of creation is suffering herself. Suffering is cunning and ruthless. She doesn't miss a single detail about anything, ever. She teaches everything in profound moral fortitude with absolute certainty. There is never any question. There's no theory. There's no hypothesis. There's nothing but moral fortitude. That's the school of suffering. That's where I attended for about 20 years. I lived in the void. When the counselors started brainwashing me, my dad made a sacrifice. He saw me getting angry. He saw me mad. He saw me hurting. And he didn't want me to hate the world and these kids. And that's part of why he struck me so hard. He wanted me to be afraid of him more than them. He said, son, you are not like them. You're a grown man, and they are children. They don't know what they're doing. They have their own problems and things wrong with them. You have to forgive them. They can't hurt you. You know they can't hurt you, not like I can. So you forgive them. They can't do anything to you. I never got in more trouble than when I would lose my temper and wasn't forgiving. That's when I really got in trouble. That's when I really got my ass kicked. Okay? But his sacrifice went deeper than that. These counselors, again, like I said, they blamed my parents' divorce on me having problems in school. I failed all through school. My dad told me very specifically, in the most profound state of attentiveness, I listened to him more than anybody in existence. I listened to everything he had to say, every syllable. And this man had a booming, trained voice of a singer. He had a very well-trained voice. He could convey the most profound emotion with just an utterance of anything. And he said, son, don't you listen to what those teachers tell you in school, because they're not going to tell you anything that's going to keep you alive when you get home. Your education is here. And I lost that education. My whole life, I lived in the void. He had to help remove it from me so that I could fit in with my friends and try to fit in this place. Because I was so different, because he taught me so much. we had to know where to go on our property with guns. We had to shoot all the time. You know, he convinced the sheriffs and everybody, all the people that were terrorizing us. He did a really good job of protecting us. My dad was militant and brilliant. He had everybody convinced that this house we lived in was just full of a bunch of crazy black people with guns. You know, because he had guns, he kept guns, and we would go shoot in the yard all the time. We shot all the time, just so everybody in any mile radius would know that we were heavily armed and always shooting. Because we heard gunshots in the middle of the night all the time, so my dad would go take his gun out, let it pop a bunch of rounds off in whatever direction we heard those shots coming from. You know, that's what we did. So I had to know, I had to be trained to kill. I had to know how to shoot and kill at 12. That's what I had to be ready for all the time. That was just it. That was just how it was. I was desensitized to it, you know. And he had to change that because he saw me changing. He told me all the time, anytime I felt insecure, anytime he saw me struggling, he would take it as an opportunity. And he would tell me, son, the only reason you're having trouble with this is because you have a pure heart. And people with pure hearts struggle with that kind of thing. You've got a pure heart, son. That's all it is. You know, that's just a matter of having a pure heart. Now, you guys see my work. You know how I am about our heart. That's the fortitude of our feelings that feel, our beating heart. That's where the antonyms are at. So, these counselors, you know, were brainwashing me, and they convinced me that it was my parents getting divorced, so my dad did something supernatural. He conceded, and this is the only time he ever lied to me, because I saw it in his eyes. He couldn't hide it. We were best friends. He said, I'm sorry I couldn't keep your mom by my side, son. I'm sorry I couldn't keep the family together. That's my fault. I failed. Okay? I messed up. I should have done better by you, son. And I'm sorry. He blamed himself. He wanted me to hate him and be mad at him so that I wouldn't hate the world. And our lessons were not all brutality and violence. Dad, we practice music all the time. I'm a drummer. I'm a talented drummer. I just haven't been able to play in the last few years. I don't have any place to put some drums, but we practiced music. We studied art. We studied literature. He had things, and he had knowledge and awareness of stuff and real history. And, you know, again, I believe from what I remember, from what came back to me, that his education was part of the tactical academics and weaponized education that women had to use to survive during the burning times that got passed on through these cunning survivors, you know, that came over to the U.S. and was, you know, was used to help educate freed slaves. You know, again, post-Civil War education was, there's a blank spot there in history. They don't talk about post-Civil War education for black people very much. Where did they go to school at? Their schools were getting burned down all the time. And up until the Civil Rights Movement, they didn't have any immediate physical safety at all. So their schools were always getting burned down. They were always being attacked. Education was taboo. And that's the kind of period and time period that my dad's education came from. And it was women who were helping teach these freed slaves. And, you know, again, this is why it's so significant that Dr. Martin Luther King was a doctor, because getting an education, having a doctorate at that time was unheard of. So he sacrificed his relationship with me. And one of the things that he did when I became rebellious was he changed my name. My name, Michael, my middle name, was a term of endearment to him. He said, son, you are not named on behalf of the Archangel. You are named directly as Michael, the Archangel. Now, I don't believe in the traditional religious version of the Archangel. When he's talking about the Archangel, there is no other archangels. Arch. That is all inclusive and all exclusive. Okay, that's what an arch is, an arch. He goes against all. He is the one that presses against all. the one character that's mentioned in just about every religion, the mysterious character that sits at the right hand of the Creator with all this mystery, shrouded in mystery and all the power of the Creator, but no real identity. So he took my identity when I became rebellious, and he started calling me by my first name, and he would over-articulate it when he said it. He would call me Nathaniel, and I had never been hit so hard in my life. It physically dropped me to my knees the first time he said it. I fell down. It hurt. He said Nathaniel. And then he took it a step further when he changed my name. He changed my name from Nathanael, just like it's written in the Bible. The gift from God, God's gift, Nathanael, like an angel with an A, to Nathanael with an I, so that I would be an individual, because that changed my entire dynamic of my name, from having 3 A's in my first name to having 3 I's in my whole name. And we all know an individual has 3 I's. So my name now has 3 I's. I am Nathaniel Michael Norris. And Nathaniel, and Michael are compound divine names. They've each got 2 meanings. Nathaniel, God's gift that God has given. Michael, one like God, who am I? And my last name means to be anointed. Norris, Jaffe Norris. Beautiful and anointed from the north. Jaffe means to be very specific. It's got a lot of different meanings. It comes from Japheth. And it's, it's all a Hebrew name. And there's a whole lot of esoteric meaning and explanation behind my name. A lot. And in certain contexts, in very conspicuous contexts, Nathaniel Norris means the exact same thing as Jesus Christ. Which would explain why, when Michael's slaying the dragon, where the hell is Jesus at? In Revelations. Because Michael comes down to slay the dragon, but Jesus is supposed to be the Savior saving everybody. Why is Michael slaying the dragon and Jesus disappears? Because it also says when he returns, it will be with the cry of the voice of the archangel. Jesus was the ultimate schizophrenic in that book. When he was on the cross with the other 2 guys on either side of him, and the one guy says, we're going to die, we're not going to make it through this, and the other guy says, you're going to see me in heaven with the Father in the glory and all that, that was his inner monologue. That was him talking to himself. 3 days and 3 nights, 3 deaths, 3 all of this, 3 awakenings. It's all 3s, 3 of everything. He's 3 people. He's the ultimate schizophrenic. The whole story, metaphysically, has no contradictions. A metaphysical crucifixion has no contradictions. His life from age 13 to 30 was a profound mystery. Michael the Archangel is one of the most mysterious characters in all of literature. There's no story about him. He's mentioned. He's got this grandiose purpose and conspicuous identity, but no story. Why is that? Well, first of all, obviously, for the obvious reason, our brilliant creator is not going to send his best fighter down there, and right after announcing that he's coming, oh, here he comes. No, you're not supposed to see it coming. You're not supposed to see it coming. And it's part of the reason why I've been so conflicted about my identity. I know exactly what I am. If my name was Johnny Walker Schumacher, I would be making and selling shoes right now. Instead, I'm a teacher. I teach. And a criminal who teaches and preaches against the church and the government. Happens to be a stud with the ladies. Has an intimate and holy, humble appreciation for their kind. Just exactly like Malibu's Most Wanted. I'm down with the bitches and the hoes. Except I also have a reverent respect for the ladies. It's my identity. It's who I am. There's nothing I can do about that. One of my favorite authors, Terry Goodkind. You learn more from fiction books than you ever do from nonfiction. A good fantasy story will teach you more about moral fortitude than you can ever learn in some educational book. Write that down. But Terry Goodkind said it really good in one of his books. He said, we can only be who we are, no more and no less. Now, I tried hard. I've been trying for the last couple of years to be less. It almost killed me more than once. When I woke up, lost my family and everything, the Creator and I, your God, we don't get along. We got beef. We have a highly toxic domestic relationship, okay? We fight. I am an unruly child, a disobedient kid who's angry and pissed off. I was happy. I had a woman who wanted nothing in the world more than to marry me. She was beautiful, came from an upper middle class family, and saved me, rescued me, literally bought and paid for me. I was a slave my whole life. I've been to jail and prison 7 times. Spent my whole life incarcerated. I took the school to prison pipeline. My dad had to suffer and watch me through it. He literally drank himself to death. And when your parents die from alcoholism, it's exactly like cancer, except instead of being heroes fighting a heroic fight, the doctors and everybody treat them like scum and slime, experiment on them and kill them in their hospital bed. I was in prison when my dad died. The day before he passed away, I was in jail. I hadn't talked to him in a few months because I was too ashamed. I didn't want to call him. I didn't want to call him from in jail. And I called him one night. Something made me call him. And, my sister told me he was in the hospital and he wasn't doing good. And I asked him, I said, Dad, what can I do to honor you? What do you want me to do? And he told me 3 things. At first I thought that he had said these 3 things because he didn't want to tell me anything that I would spend the rest of my life trying to reach but never achieve. He said, son, first I want you to make it through where you're at and what's going to happen to you. You need to make it through where you're going. You have to survive first. And while you're doing that, I want you to say the Lord's Prayer every night before you go to sleep. The Lord's Prayer. It's very specific, and he was really specific when he taught me that prayer growing up. There's a lot behind it. It's an objective prayer, directly to the Creator, not to Jesus or any other deity. And last thing he said that he wanted me to do was finish my education. I didn't really understand what he meant by that until a few years ago, when everything that he taught me came flooding back. And I was freaking out. Doctors said I had PTSD. I'd been fighting a war my whole life and didn't even realize it. I had no idea something was wrong with me. I was screaming at my ex-girlfriend, fighting with her every day. I was freaking out. I would freak out because all this stuff was flooding into my head. All of this esoteric stuff. And I'm scrambling to try to write everything down. And she would interrupt me with stuff about the kids or stuff about the house, and I was neglecting my domestic duties. I wasn't being a good man. I can't believe she put up with me as long as she did. And we had a bad breakup, and I ended up in jail for saying stuff I shouldn't have said because I told her, I said, I'm going to go shoot it out with the cops and die by suicide by cop. I'll do it right now. I'll fucking do it. I wanted to die. I wanted to die. I was happy. The Creator took away my free will. I didn't get to be domesticated. I didn't get to stay asleep. Nobody likes being jostled awake when they're taking a good nap on a Sunday afternoon. You wake up cranky. But the Creator took away my free will. I don't have free will. I have a duty. A job. That's why I've been making these videos. It's not me making those videos. I'm not doing that on purpose. I didn't want to make TikTok videos when I grow up. I didn't plan this. I didn't want this. I didn't want to have some conspicuous, gaudy, over-the-top, cursed name. He said, son, he told me this when I was a kid. He said, son, you have to walk the most dangerous path in all of creation. And it's very unfortunate, but it's what you have to do. Again, Dad was an astrologist, a very skilled astrologist. He was talented. Everything he did, he was really good at it. Again, he was different. Okay? But he dealt in the future. That was his work. That was his job. That's what he did. He was a future worker. As an astrologist, he'd predict the moon, the sun, the stars, and the earth. I barely know anything about it. I have to rely on the Metasapien to tell me stuff about the moon, the sun, the stars, and the earth. I've got kind of a block about it. All I do is know. That's all I do. It's a curse. Everybody else calls it a blessing. Oh, that's a blessing. You've got this Hebrew name. You're blessed. No. Blessing has an antonym. True righteousness is only manifested in the shadow of profound wrongdoing. True righteousness is only manifested in the shadow of profound wrongdoing. That's why my whole life living in the void, I did wrong. I cheated on every girlfriend I ever had. I broke the law. The first time I went to prison, I actually had blood on my hands. I hurt somebody. Lost my kids. Nothing describes me except the lies that deny the truth. Okay? Remind me to tell you the story about how my ex, who is the mother of my first and second born, stalks me and haunts me with my kids and alienated me from them when I went to prison. Remind me to tell you that story. It's twisted. It's short of it, I'll tell you right now. My first and second born son, they're being raised by a right-wing, pro-Trump Christian pastor. Write that down. And they think that I abandoned them. But I'll tell you the truth of that story. In case you ever do hear from my ex, because she has not shy about telling people that I'm a deadbeat dad who abandoned his kids. I was angry. She took him when I went to prison. I thought I loved her. We had a lustful relationship, but she left and married another man when I was in prison. Took my kids away, took my parental rights, and I was mad. And Nathaniel from the void was violent. That was his defining characteristic. He was hyper-physical. You can see it in my Facebook pictures. I left that place. I left Bismarck, North Dakota, my hometown, only so that I did not kill her and her husband for taking my kids. If I saw them at the store or something, there's absolutely no way that I would have been able to stop myself, and I knew that. So I left. But there's a lot of details to that story. I've got messages and stuff. Again, absolutely every single thing I'm telling you, I have receipts for. All of it. There is no embellishments here, okay? Hang on a sec.